Well, hi, we're back. And once again, I'm your host, Patrick Anderson. And today we're having an interview with Eva Blazejewski. And Eva is the partner in the Roadrunner Law firm. She's also a founding member of the National Academy of Motorcycle Injury Lawyers. And what we were talking about is what happened here just on July 18th, this terrible wreck near Kerrville, Texas, where this drunk driver comes across the center line, runs into several members of the Thin Blue Line Motorcycle Law Enforcement Club. And boy, just terrible. 3 people killed, 4 injured, put in the hospital. I was talking with Steve Wyatt, who's the president of the Fort Myers chapter, and Steve was telling me how one rider had his leg terribly damaged. The bike's caught on fire. It was a really terrible accident. So, Eva, the question in everybody's minds, all of our listeners, is if this accident had happened in New Mexico, what would you do to get justice for all the riders and their families?
Wow, Patrick. Yeah, terrible tragedy. I can't imagine. I have friends in motorcycle clubs and they ride in groups like that because New Mexico has such great weather and such great riding highways and scenic and all throughout the state. So I can't imagine somebody doing that to a club, but it's complicated questions. There's a lot going on. We would separate the deaths from the injuries because in New Mexico, if there's a wrongful death, a personal representative has to be appointed to represent that estate of the wrongful death, and it's totally separate from any kind of probate estate. It's its own thing. And so a personal representative would be appointed for each of the estates of the wrongful deaths, the people who were killed, and that's a statutory construction in New Mexico. And that in itself is complicated because we can appoint a personal representative who's a family member, but we can also do an attorney who's hired to be a personal representative, and we do that to get a better venue for the case. So sometimes we want to be in Santa Fe, for example, because it is a liberal jurisdiction. First of all, the jury verdicts are liberal, and because insurance companies know that, they're a little bit more scared of being venued in Santa Fe. So sometimes for strategic reasons, we want to get somebody who's appointed PR, personal representative, in Santa Fe for those reasons. But in any case, we go for things such as loss of consortium if there are children or spouses left of the deceased, who of course are going to lose the companionship of that person for the rest of their lives. Those are recoverable. There's lost wages, the wages that person would have contributed to the household for the remainder of their working life. Of course, medical bills are always a big one. If the person survived for any amount of time, there are probably huge airlift or emergency room costs that have to be dealt with. And we deal with all that. We want to take all the stress and all the time that it takes to deal with medical bills and health insurance and auto insurance away from the family so they can focus on what they need to be focusing on, which is their loved ones and arrangements that need to be made after something like this happens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I was talking with Steve, he said that they're going to be having large funerals, like 200-300 riders at each one. And they're going to be up in Chicago and then down in Texas, of course. He's in Fort Myers. They had several riders from that chapter as well. So just the cost of flying around and, dealing with all those expenses is tremendous. And then all the stress and grief. You bet.
Yeah, I can't imagine. The other thing that's important here when you talk about the time is, unfortunately, when something like this happens, evidence and witnesses disappear really quickly. So that's another advantage of getting an attorney involved is we have investigators, we have accident reconstructionists, we have people who go out to the scene and collect evidence, and witnesses disappear and they change phone numbers, and their memory goes. So it's important to at least get that stuff documented. We will take video statements of witnesses. We'll get accident reconstructionists out there who deal with motorcycle accidents and are experts at calculations and skid marks, and they will weigh vehicles and measure vehicles and get all of that really well documented. Sometimes the highway, I don't think that's a matter in this case, but sometimes the highway is marked improperly, or there are hazardous conditions with either construction or weather where a roadway or a highway needs to be either shut down, or markings need to be put up ahead of time so that it slows traffic down. And we have had cases where we've brought in the New Mexico Department of Transportation and sued them because markings are off, or construction is such that you can't, it's not safe to travel. So those things have to be done really early on to preserve that evidence. That's another consideration in these types of cases.
Right, and then in this case, I'm sure it doesn't apply, but sometimes you got to figure out who's at fault. And then, aren't you dealing with insurance companies sometimes who don't want to pay out and they want to deny or diminish claims? I know that's my experience anyway.
Absolutely. You would think that in cases like this, your own insurance company would cooperate with you and get you everything that you're entitled to, but they don't. They are there to protect themselves. And even though you've been paying them premiums every month on time, or they'll drop you, they will fight for every penny, and they will not tell you what you're entitled to, or they'll try to put fault on you. Like if you weren't wearing a helmet, or you weren't wearing a seatbelt, or any little thing, sometimes they'll even put 10% without even knowing why. They just do it as a matter of fact, thinking that people aren't going to fight it. So we definitely, do that investigation up front and make the best case possible so that we can tell them there's no way there's any fault on our client, even with not wearing a helmet. We don't have a helmet law in New Mexico unless you're under 18, and in Albuquerque, I think it's a city ordinance, but so they can't use that kind of stuff against you. And New Mexico is a pure comparative fault state. So even if you're 50% at fault or 70% at fault, you can still recover for that other 50 or 30% that you're not at fault for. So that's very important to remember too. Sometimes people think, oh, well, maybe I was speeding, or maybe I took that corner too fast, so forget it, I don't have a claim. Well, you still might. You still might for the portion that was not your fault.
Yeah, we see this a lot where, bikers and riders getting blamed, and it's just not right. Just not right.
Right, and bikers get blamed a lot, and that's part of the reason I do this, is because I've seen police reports and even 911 operators who say things that are obviously recorded that end up not being true. Like, for example, a motorcyclist we had was rear-ended, and the 911 operator right off the bat knew the street and was familiar with that street as being a drag racing street. And so she said, well, he shouldn't have been racing. And he was stopped. He had a red light and got rear-ended. So that kind of stuff happens all the time on police reports, and we always have to clarify those things and get witnesses and get 911 calls. Sometimes we find witnesses through our investigation who support the writer's story, and we build our case from there.
Right. Now, this is a really bad dude, too. He came across the center line, he'd been drinking, and he'd already been arrested before, DUIs. I don't have all the details, but one story that I heard was that he'd run over some guys at a bar and even bit off his ear when he attacked him. But terrible. But I did notice, I was looking at your website, that you take care of victims of drunk drivers.
Right. So when an accident happens, it's bad enough. It turns your life upside down. But when the other person is, texting, drunk, high, it just like adds insult to injury. It makes it so much worse for people to recover mentally from the harm they've been caused. So this guy will be facing some serious criminal charges, hopefully, and time in prison. But we help with the DA is ultimately the one who presses charges and does the criminal part of it, but we work with the family or the victim in criminal court, and we go to the hearings, and of course they come with us, or they're welcome to come with us or not. Some people just don't want to deal with it. So what we will do is file a motion to allow us to speak to the victim and be a victim advocate in those cases. And I always like to present to the criminal judge, here were the injuries. This wasn't a victimless crime. This wasn't just a car accident. This was a case where the person lost their leg, or they lost their job, or they have a brain injury and now their wife doesn't really have a husband, or their husband doesn't really have a wife who's the same as they used to be. Because I think when the judge is coming up with sentencing and deciding what kind of a sentence to give to this guy, he hears from the criminal's family. The family's always there saying, oh, he's really a good guy, he's got children, you can't put him in prison forever. Well, the judge needs to hear the other side of that and hear what the victim had to go through. So yeah, so either the victim comes with us and talks, and we prepare victim statements and what is compelling for the court to hear, or we will be their voice in court if they're not comfortable speaking in public, or if they just don't want to have anything to do with that. We get permission, of course, to speak for them in criminal court.
So that's really tremendous, because rather than just getting people money, you're absolutely getting them justice in a real meaningful way.
I mean, we really try. We really have issues in New Mexico with drunk driving and with uninsured motorists. So we really try to do whatever we can, because it helps the injured person heal, not only physically but mentally, to know that someone fought for them and spoke for them, and that they got to express to the court how they were impacted by this accident.
Right. Well, talk to me about pain and suffering and punitive damages, and what you do to get the most compensation for people so they can pay their ongoing medical bills and get their life back together.
So pain and suffering is a part of the recovery that you're entitled to when you're in a car accident. So you get medical bills back, you get lost wages, they're called hard damages, and those are things you can prove on paper. You can prove that you missed 3 days of work at $100 a day, and you can do that math, and that's pretty easy. But there's also the intangible, the pain and suffering. You couldn't hold your kids, you couldn't enjoy life, you couldn't do a sport that you do or ride your bike, or if that's if that's what de-stresses you and that's what you enjoy, then you lost that, and that has a value. So that goes into the pain and suffering, and we build that story, and we get to know our clients and really get to know what they do and what their life is like, and we kind of tell the story to the insurance company. Punitive damages are a different type of damage, and it's when the person who's caused the accident or the wreck or whatever the personal injury may be, when they've acted really bad. So they were drunk, they were texting, they were high. We push for it in cases where people have several traffic violations. Not only were they speeding, but they were cutting people off, they were running red lights, and there's several things going on at once. Or where they've done this type of thing before, where it was a hit and run and they have a history of hit and runs. So we really try to be creative and get every kind of damages we can in every case. And so those are extra damages. Punitive damages are on top of regular damages, and they can really be significant. So I would say to anybody who knows they were hit, either a biking accident, motor vehicle accident, by someone who is drinking or texting or just speeding at a really, really excessive speed, to really call us, because we will develop that case and get even more on top of the regular damages you can get. And those can be really significant sometimes, yeah.
I imagine, yeah. So I just had my insurance coverage changed because I didn't realize at the time. My agent told me I was getting full coverage, right? But I guess there's really no such thing as full coverage. So if somebody's in a motorcycle club, you had told me at the break that they should call your office, and you come in and talk to their club and all their members and go over their insurance coverage for them. So they make sure that if anything bad like this happened, even if the other person has no insurance or very limited insurance, that you can look at their coverage, make sure that their bike is protected, that their family and their finances are protected. That's so important. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I really preach this to every motorcycle club I speak to every motorcycle client I have, to anybody who will listen. Really, you cannot count on the other guy having good coverage and protecting you. You've got to look out for yourself, and you're really looking out for your kids and your spouse and your family who's left behind. Even if you aren't fatally injured, you're still injured, you can't work. You really need to protect yourself and have good uninsured motorist coverage. Like I was telling you, about 20% of people in New Mexico do not have any kind of insurance coverage. It's one of the highest states of not covered people. So you've got to protect yourself. And just because an agent sells you full coverage, nobody really knows what that is. It may not be full, like what you and I think of as full coverage. You've got to make sure, right. You've got to make sure that you have good uninsured motorist coverage, because when you're on a bike, your injuries may be even more severe than if you're in a car. And you've got to have, if you have other vehicles in the house, that coverage can be stacked, which means it multiplies by the number of vehicles, and they all get to kind of add together. And those things have to be specifically explained to you and specifically rejected by you. So the one thing that we have in New Mexico is really good law and case law about uninsured motorist coverage. Our courts, our Supreme Court and Court of Appeals have been very good about that. So make sure that you check with us, a New Mexico firm who knows the case law of New Mexico, because what we do a lot is we always request a certified policy for our clients, because sometimes these insurance companies don't realize what New Mexico requirements are to reject certain coverages. And so what we can do is reform. It's called a reformation. We can reform that policy to include it, even though you didn't technically pay for it or you didn't buy it, because the insurance company didn't do what they were supposed to have you reject it. So anyway, that's a long way of saying we look at every insurance policy to make sure we get you every piece of coverage that you can potentially get, and to check and double check that the insurance company did what they were supposed to comply with New Mexico law. And sometimes we can get you more than you even thought you had. So it's very important. Call our office, come by. We're here on Rio Grande. We are happy to take a look and do an insurance review for you. We'll take a look at your coverage. Just bring it on your cell phone or in paper, and I can take a quick look at it and tell you, you probably need a little more here, or you don't need this much here. You know, it's better for you to put it in this pile than in this pile. Sometimes people will have crazy coverages for property damage for the other person if they happen to cause an accident, and it's just not necessary. But they'd be better off protecting themselves and uninsured motorist coverage. Yeah, so I'm happy to look at anybody's motorcycle policy, car policy, and tell them free of charge what they should probably consider getting. And sometimes it's not that expensive. It's not that much more a month to have lots more coverage.
Well, that's a great free service to the community. Everybody should take advantage of that. Now, one of the things about the Thin Blue Line Law Enforcement Motorcycle Club that I didn't know about, but I was really interested in when I talked to Steve Wyatt, is they do so much good in the community. They're out taking care of the homeless. They're supporting food banks. They're getting equipment and like canine vests and stuff for local police departments that may not have the budgets that they need for certain things, and then totally supporting fallen riders all the time. So I know there's not a Thin Blue Line LEMC in New Mexico, but you do have the Blue Knights there.
Yes, that's my understanding, is that we don't have a Thin Blue Line chapter here in New Mexico, but we do have the Blue Knights, and who also do good work. And in my experience, most of the motorcycle clubs also do charitable work, and we're always happy to get involved in those. I'm going out with God's Misfits tonight to do some homeless reaching out to some of the homeless in our community, and they do that every other Saturday. And we try to help them out as much as we can. I know there are clubs that support veterans, and if a veteran is in need of yard work, for example, or having a ramp built or whatever it may be, the guys go out there and help with that. And they support the children in our community who don't have school supplies or school uniforms. And we've helped with many clubs and their charities, and we're happy to do that as long as it benefits the community. We're here, we live here, so it's in our best interest to support and take care of our community here in New Mexico. And so we're happy to do that. We're very blessed and fortunate to be able to do that whenever we can. So we're always happy to talk to anyone about charitable events.
Yeah, and then you're part of the NMMRO as well?
Yes, we're part of the New Mexico Motorcyclist Rights Organization, who also does charitable work, and we speak at their meetings whenever we could have meetings. We haven't had one in a long time, but this case brings to mind, we've been trying to change the Careless Driving Act here in New Mexico for some time, and I've testified at the legislative level to try to get that changed, because when it's a drunk driving accident like this one, unfortunately, it's easy to prove vehicular homicide, but sometimes people are careless. They're not drunk, but they may be on their phone and kill someone. And so we think the penalties for that should be much more severe than just a traffic ticket. So there are motorcycle groups in the NMMRO and us who are really trying to change the law here in New Mexico to get more penalties for careless drivers.
You know, I can't help but notice the big painting on the wall behind you there. So besides taking care of any injuries that people have caused by other people, you also, if a motorcyclist has any criminal issues, DUI, or if they Second Amendment rights come up, then do you want them to call your office as well?
Absolutely. Call our office for any legal needs. If we can't do it, we will get you in touch with an attorney here in town who can. We've got a network of attorneys that we work with and refer cases to that we trust. So we will get you the right kind of person, whether it's a wills issue or a criminal issue or a domestic issue. I'll get you in touch with someone. I want bikers to know that they can always call us, even if they don't know if it's a legal issue or not, or what kind of lawyer they may need. Sometimes people don't know if it's a personal injury or a workers' comp issue or a Second Amendment issue or what. So call us. We're always here. Our number's easy, 444-4321. And ask for me, ask for my partner, Heather. We will take the time to help you out as best as we can.
Now tell people also your website address and how they can get your legal guide and your Rider VIP card with extra benefits.
Yep, so just go to New Mexico Biker Lawyer, just Google that, or NM Biker Lawyer, and it'll take you straight to our website. You can also go to www.roadrunnerlaw.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, whatever's easiest for you. You can find us multiple ways.
All right, great. Well, that's a wrap. We're going to go to a break, but Eva, would you mind sticking around? I got a couple other questions for you.
Sure, Patrick, thanks.